गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। आज हम अफगानिस्तान के बारे में और जानकारी हासिल करेंगे और ये जानकारी हासिल करेंगे अफगानिस्तान थ्रू एन इंडियन प्रिज्म, एक इनसाइडर का स्टोरी। और ये इनसाइडर है मिस्टर समीर बसीन जो मेरे साथ अभी जुड़े हुए हैं। वेलकम समीर, वेलकम टू द शो। इट्स अ
Thank you,
ग्रेट
sir.
thing to have you on Gunner Shot for the first time.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, मैं सबको बताना चाहता हूँ something about समीर। समीर is of course an Indian. He stays in Delhi, but ये इनका जान पहचान अफगानिस्तान के साथ बहुत है। इनका नाता है अफगानिस्तान के साथ। ये लोगों को जानते हैं वहाँ, ये रह चुके हैं वहाँ, यहाँ बिजनेस कर चुके हैं। उनके पॉलिटिकल एंटिटीज के साथ काम कर चुके हैं, चाहे वो तालिबान हो या नॉर्थ अलायंस हो या और तरीके। उन्होंने इंटरनेशनल तौर पर अमेरिकन, फ्रेंच वगैरह के साथ भी नाता है इनका। और ये ट्रैक टू डायलॉग में भी कभी कभी शरीक हुए हैं। राइट, मेरे ख्याल में जब भी हम किसी देश के साथ बात करना चाहते हैं, किसी स्थिति के साथ बात करना चाहते हैं, वहां का ऑन ग्राउंड जमीनी हालत क्या है उसके बारे में सही जानकारी हासिल करना इम्पोर्टेंट है। ना कि हम सोचते ना, हमारा सोच है कि क्या होगा वहां। सो द ग्राउंड ऑन ग्राउंड एक्सपीरियंस इज इम्पोर्टेंट, नंबर एक। नंबर दो, अफगानिस्तान और अफगानिस्तान का स्थिति बदल रहा है और बहुत तेजी से बदल रहा है और हमें ये पहचान होना चाहिए। दो चीज मैं बताना चाहता हूँ किस तरीके से बदल गया है अफगानिस्तान। 2 साल 2.5 साल पहले हम सोच रहे थे कि भाई अफगानिस्तान में बर्बादी ही बर्बादी होगा, सब कुछ लुट जाएगा, पाकिस्तान हावी हो जाएगा, चाइना हावी हो जाएगा, उधर चाइना वहां से खान बनाएंगे और मेटल्स ले जाएंगे वगैरह वगैरह। वहां कुछ नहीं हुआ। वो सब उल्टा क्या हो रहा है आज के दिन अखबार में जो निकला है वो ये है, बदरुद्दीन हक्कानी जो जलालुद्दीन हक्कानी के बेटे हैं, वो जो दोहा में एनवॉय हैं, उनको बुलाया जा रहा है एज हमारा गणतंत्र दिवस का चीफ गेस्ट और अदर गेस्ट बाय और एम्बेसी इन दोहा। ठीक, ये 2 साल पहले 2.5 साल पहले हम सोच भी नहीं सकते थे। तो बदलाव है, देयर इज अ रियलिटी व्हिच इज टेकिंग प्लेस। सेकंड, अगर आप देखोगे, हम सब सोचते हैं अफगानिस्तान के अंदर पैसा नहीं है, ये है वो है। नहीं, पर आज के दिन अफगानिस्तान का जो अफगानी है, इट इज मोर स्टेबल देन द रूपी। और तीसरी बात जो मैं बहुत बार बता चुका हूं मणिपुर के सिलसिले में, कि अफगानिस्तान में क्या है, ड्रग्स यानी ओपियम की प्रोडक्शन खत्म हो गया है। इसीलिए म्यांमार में प्रॉब्लम शुरू हो गया, जो मैं हर वक्त बताता रहता हूँ। और ये जो बंद होना, ये मेरे ख्याल में बहुत बड़ा उपलब्धि है अफगानिस्तान के लिए, और ये हुआ तालिबान 2.0 के माध्यम से। ये कभी सोच नहीं सकते थे। 20 साल यूएसए अफगानिस्तान में रहा, वो कुछ कर नहीं पाए। तो बदलाव है। इसीलिए मैंने सोचा समीर बसीन को बुलाऊं और वो अपना दिल से बात करे आपके साथ कि अफगानिस्तान में क्या हो रहा है, इकोनॉमिकली, सोशली और सिक्योरिटी वाइज। तालिबान 1 क्या था, तालिबान 2 क्या था, इसका थोड़ा हिस्ट्री, थोड़ा फ्यूचर, इंडिया के साथ कैसा नाता होगा, चाइना के साथ कैसे चल रहा है और रीजनल एक्टर्स के साथ कैसे चल रहा है। समीर, over to you. You can speak in English, you can speak in Hindi, any language, it doesn't matter. Any amount of time, just take off.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm also one of your followers and fans, and exchange thoughts with you and follow your blog. So, thank you for this opportunity. I have had a long association with Afghanistan. My first interaction with Afghans was in Moscow in after the collapse of the Soviet Union for business, and so I had an interaction with the Afghan diaspora in Russia and in the US. Post 9/11, I got an opportunity to go to the Afghanistan in August of roughly a year after 9/11, August of 2002. I had, besides my businesses there, I had a very popular restaurant called Anar, and I was also appointed the GSA, which is the franchise holder of Indian Airlines, and subsequently, which was merged with Air India in 2005. I also got involved with the efforts made by the international community to promote privatization and investments in Afghanistan at the highest level. I actually traveled with President Karzai as part of the state visit, heading the Afghan business delegation to India, and I coordinated that delegation and brought it to India. On the political side, because in Afghanistan, we understand, it was going through a phase where it was finding its feet back and transitioning from a turmoilous period to a more phase of stabilization and institution building. So I also got involved at different levels on with the politics and in there, as it was more on the economic agenda, but then it's all mixed up.
Yeah.
So I will, for our viewers, I will start with I'll quickly give you a thing on for some people, to give them a background, that Afghanistan broadly is what I call in its it's part of the Great Game continuing. So we all know about the Great Game One, and which was the British era. That's the way I divide up the history of Afghanistan. And Great Game Two started with the Russian invasion, and Great Game Three started after 9/11. After the withdrawal of this is a part of phase two of the Great Game Three, where the US still has an intervention because it signed a deal with the Taliban, and it still is in close communication. Although we all know that there is no formal recognition of Taliban, but if you followed the Doha talks closely, Ambassador Khalilzad, who led the talks, actually involved all the major players, including India, and kept them informed on the political process with Afghanistan. And as we know that the Afghan Taliban started while they were in Doha visiting, except for India, they visited Pakistan, of course, China, Russia, and they communicated with the Americans through Doha. Although on the signing of the deal, Trump made a little faux pas that he wanted to take credit for the deal, and he didn't realize that he asked for the signing the deal to be done at Camp David, without realizing that you were calling the people who had actually were not directly involved in 9/11, but had given shelter to the main perpetrator of 9/11, Osama bin Laden. So their association with Al Qaeda would not be easy to explain. So we post 9/11, quickly Afghanistan went through a phase where the Americans, first, as we know, took over Kabul in a very short period. They ousted Afghanistan in practically a month. They entered through the north, and they were in Kabul by November, December of 2001. President Karzai, as we know, was in late 2001 at Bonn, appointed the transitional leader, and subsequently in 2002 he was appointed as the transitional head of the government. His first election took place in 2004, where he got 50%, 55, I think 55% of the vote, and Kanuni, who represented the Northern Alliance, got about 16%. His reign, President Karzai's reign, although the Americans wanted Afghanistan to move, or the West, and including us, wanted a democratic model, but knowing the old cultural what I call the political culture of Afghanistan, with the tribals, etc., it was difficult to sort of fast track democracy and establish confidence in a democratic setup, where people would not know where they stand. As you know, Afghanistan has conventionally got what is called a Loya Jirga, which is like a Mahapanchayat in Indian context. So there are a few thousand people who who aggregate in Kabul and discuss different issues facing the country, and come to a consensus on the way forward. So President Karzai, knowing this was a mixed bag, and he did not really pursue institution building while managing these contradictions, and there was large scale reporting of corruption and nepotism. His second phase started in 2009, where uh, former President Ghani and Dr. Abdullah stood against him, and then as there was still as one of the U.S. Diplomats said, the winner doesn't take all, but there was sort of a compromise reached by the U.S. and President Karzai was appointed as the president. Uh, in the meantime, on the security, this is the political side up to President Karzai. In the meantime, the U.S. basically, although went into Afghanistan and very soon declared that their major combat operations are over in early 2002, but Taliban started reorganizing themselves in around early 2002, and as under Mullah Omar, who was the key founder of Afghanistan of Taliban in 1994, and took over Kabul in '96 and reigned most of the territory of Afghanistan till 2001, just till 9/11. So just before, as we all know, before 9/11, Ahmad Shah Massoud was actually coincidentally, but a little strangely, killed 2 days before 9/11, and by purportedly Al Qaeda actors. Uh, so, on the security side, the U.S. campaign went through three administrations, two under first George Bush Jr., then Obama, and then Trump. Okay, so and then finally withdrew. The final withdrawal process was initiated by Trump with the peace deal, but was concluded by Biden. We all have seen those pictures of the Americans leaving Afghanistan, which actually are very distressing pictures because it was a lot of chaos. And interestingly, the American 82nd Airborne Division landed in Kabul which is again a strange coincidence, on 14th of August, and Taliban walked into to conduct the evacuation a day before the Taliban walked into. But that was precipitated by President Ghani leaving, and in fact, the U.S. general who was in charge of the 82nd Airborne, which was primarily assigned to secure the perimeter of the Kabul airport on the military side and conduct the evacuation process. They could not take everyone, but they took about 6,000 U.S. nationals and 122,000 Afghans who were closely associated with Afghanistan, whether civilian or military personnel, and most of them were taken out to different areas, and then from there there were processes of visas, etc., were processed, and then after security clearances moved to the US. The Taliban, as we know, walked in on August 15th, which was seen in India as a snub from Pakistan, because it was the Indian Independence Day, and we saw those images of the previous ISI chief having tea with Taliban in the Serena Hotel, which was widely covered by the Indian media. And then everyone was of the view that the Pakistan has basically achieved its objective of what we used to call strategic depth in Afghanistan, and the US has left Afghanistan and handed it over to Pakistan. And I was constantly of the view that that was not the real picture, because you have to understand that the Taliban, if you take the example of Mullah Brother, he was arrested in 2010 by a joint CIA-ISI team from in Karachi. and he was imprisoned for 8 years and released only in 2018 when the Doha process was gathering steam, and he was then made the chief negotiator for on behalf of the Taliban, who was the counterpart to Ambassador Khalilzad, who was appointed as the special representative um, for the talks by Trump as the special negotiator for the peace process, for the U.S. withdrawal process. So there were two parts to that deal. One was the withdrawal of, which is the primary objective, withdrawal of the U.S. forces from Afghanistan, safe withdrawal. As we all know that we saw it what happened with the Brits and the Russians in the past. Everyone is concerned that that the enemy would not shoot them in the back. As you're an army man, you would understand when you are withdrawing forces, you need to protect your backside. So uh, they basically moved troops. They started a process of moving troops from forward bases into major forward operational posts to bigger bases and to large population centers. And as we know that uh, although the deal was signed on February 20th, uh, 29th February 2020, when COVID was just engulfing the world in Qatar, and Biden decided to stick to the deal and continue the withdrawal. Trump had agreed to a deadline of May of 2021, but Trump initially asked for an extension of till September of 21. Uh, as we know that major U.S. forces actually departed just before July 4th, 2002. We know that Bagram, which was the biggest base in Afghanistan, which was actually built by the Russians, and then it was the largest base for the U.S. forces in Afghanistan, just north of Kabul, uh, was evacuated on July 2nd, 2021. And post that, as I said, August 14th, Major General Chris Donahue, the commander of the U.S. Army 82nd Airborne Division, completed the evacuation mission on August 30th, before the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So Americans followed their line which appealed to political statements to their domestic audience. Now coming to Afghanistan, the current situation in Afghanistan is that post August 15th, uh, uh, there has been complete cessation of violence. There is country's overall security situation has improved, and civilian casualties have declined uh, uh, considerably. Although there are still some attacks which are conducted by ISKP, which is sort of, I wouldn't say right now concern for. See, there's a rivalry between ISKP and the Taliban, because Taliban follow Hanafi Deobandi Hanafi school of Islam, whereas the ISKP, which is the originate from ISIS, follows which starting roots in Afghanistan way back in 2014. And interestingly, on the eastern border of Afghanistan, in area called Nangarhar, where for reference of people, which is Jalalabad area, which is closer to Peshawar. So even the Amrullah Saleh, the then NDS chief, used to, and then subsequently vice president, used to remark that how come ISIS is landing on the eastern side of the border, crossing all over Iran, which is completely anti-ISIS and Shia, because ISIS is, as you know, is a Sunni follow Sunni form of Islam. So security situation by and large is peaceful. The IDPs, which had internally displaced people because of U.S. forces moving into the main bases, left. Although Taliban, there are different estimates, governed and ruled and run their till the collapse of the government, anywhere between 30 to 50% territory, and contested the rest. But the IDPs basically moved into large cities like Kabul, during the US withdrawal process, and most of them have now returned, and peace has returned. Uh, Means in a large part. Um, uh, Besides that, as far as the economic situation is concerned, I used to always call Afghanistan the drug and donation economy, which was the uh, major sources of revenue. So, as you know, that as you rightly said in your introduction, that Afghanistan, and that's also an interesting statistic because US went in there with all its, DEA operating there on the ground and the UN drug control, UN ODC, etc., operating there. They actually the area under cultivation because interestingly, when they took over Kabul and throughout the Afghanistan, the drug production in Afghanistan was 300 tons, and the US left it was 6,000 tons. So it grew 20 times. And this is a strange phenomenon to explain that, with all the uh, operations for controlling drug and eradicating, it actually grew exponentially. So I will not try to, go further into that, but that's the reality. As far as the economy is concerned, it has although shrunk largely because I said as it's a drug and donation economy. It has estimates are it's shrunk by 30%. There are close to 1 million people who've lost their jobs. Uh, 75 to 90% of the population is suffering from some form of food insecurity. Although the UN and with the World Food Program is provides uh, the population 25% of population with food aid and cash handouts, but it's not enough. Uh, as far as the revenue for the IE is concerned, this is another interesting fact. The US used to the Afghan budget at the time of the previous under the US presence was about 6 billion, and the target for 4 billion was provided by the US, but 2 billion was to be is the target for the Afghan government to generate revenue by the government itself. With all the US consultants and all the support, they were not unable to achieve it, and the large reason for that was corruption. And the Taliban, interestingly, have achieved that, without any of the consultants or any support from the US. And it is primarily because they have clamped down hard on corruption, and internal trade has and it has reduced the cost of operating because corruption and unlawful, which I call a lot of borders had unlawful tax collection, as we know, as the border areas were basically let out to local warlords, which were collecting, running their own sort of fiefdom and collecting revenues on the borders. Besides that, the US is on the economic side is different reports. They want to not be seen as doing it. They're providing 40 to 80 million dollars per week to the current administration Taliban, which of the which I call Taliban or IEA, which basically shores up the Afghan currency, which is actually stronger than the rupee now, and of course much stronger than the Pakistani currency. And uh, in fact, I was in Dubai recently, and there are a lot of Pashtun drivers who come from the KPG area, so bordering from Waziristan, etc. So I always talk to them when I take a ride in the cab. So although I don't speak Pashto, I speak a little bit of Dari, understand Dari almost completely. So I was talking to them about the situation. So he said that peace has returned. And one interesting factor he said we have the identity for both sides. As we all know that although Pakistan is trying to fence the border, which is the Durand line, but people, it's still porous. So he said we actually go to Afghanistan to do buy our daily needs. It's cheaper in Afghanistan to buy them compared to Pakistan. So we know that economically, where the Pakistani rupee is compared to the dollar, it's I think 300 plus something.
Yeah, 300 plus.
Yeah, Afghan currency is around 60. I don't know. I'm not checked lately, but around 60 something. Fluctuates between 60 and 65. The international community, uh, as far as the international community is concerned, post President Ghani's exit and Taliban taking over, most of the foreign missions and the donors basically uh, left on. Of course, the US had already planned it, so they had already moved their diplomatic staff out of their embassy in Kabul during the evacuation process, and then subsequently left after the evacuation was complete. And most some some of the other people operate their missions. Of course, the U.S. mission is coordinated with the Qataris. So the Qatar embassy in Kabul is sort of uh, the U.S. Sort of provides their facilities to the U.S. And of course, the US's major engagements with the Taliban is conducted in, as we all know, in Qatar, where the peace talks happen. And as far as Iran, so the other issue is on the social side. Uh, as we all know, that Taliban, although promised that they will not, go back to their Taliban 1.0 norms on uh, social and civic rights, but that has been a mixed bag, and within the Taliban, um, uh, the Akhundzada, the Amir, is considered more hard line, and although there is the Shura, but he's said to be still there is uh, sort of a difference of opinion between him and the moderate group, which includes. So he under him has his deputies are Mullah Brother, who conducted the talks with the U.S. There is Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is the Interior Minister. There is Mullah Omar's son, Mullah Yaqub, who's the Defense Minister. So these are the main centers of power in Kabul. So they are more moderate, but also you have to understand that Haqqani belongs to the eastern part of Afghanistan, whereas the Kandahari, so-called, which is the traditional base of the Taliban, where they originated. Mullah Yaqub and Mullah Abdul Ghani belong to the Kandahari base. In fact, before Mullah Brother was arrested, he was the deputy to Mullah Omar, and so there is still a sort of a negotiation. It's not frozen in time, but I hear a lot of times from sources in Kabul that so there are two things they see that may happen. I mean, let's see. We hope for the best in March is because when the schools reopen, that they may relax the restrictions on women and girls as far as pursuing secondary education and higher education, and also in terms of employment. Although the Taliban clamped down on the NGOs, as we have heard in end of 22, saying that women working there were not observing norms of strict norms as far uh, as laid down by the Taliban in terms of their conduct and dressing. But then as we know, which was reported, then the UN and the NGOs wound up their operations, and that stopped, deeply affected the Afghan women and families and children. So then it was decided that by the Taliban that women would be allowed to operate in the health and education area, would work there. So there it's sort of started. But so there is a constitution being drafted which will cover these issues. At present, the Taliban uses Afghanistan has two constitutions: the 1964 constitution and the 2004 constitution post 9/11. The Taliban follow that, except for areas where there's a contradiction with Sharia. So their Sharia is predominant. So it's a mixed bag because they really don't have a constitution or a legal framework which they follow in terms of general governance. So it is still a little ad hoc, right? Uh, as far as we talked about the drugs already, the other issues is in the region. Uh, as we know, Afghanistan uh, has had meetings with different countries before their signing of the accord in Doha in both China and Russia. Okay, so Russia, as we saw Lavrov's recent statements uh, uh, in the media, that is still talking about an inclusive government. But I would want to clarify here, what inclusive meant when the Taliban was in Doha before August 15th is different what inclusive means today. People still think that the old warlords and the old what we call Afghan Kabul elite or the Afghan elite is being talked about, that their return. It's not so. It is that you will allow a moderate form where you will allow more representation to the minorities, which is the Shias, and so you'll accommodate them and allow them more representation. When we say inclusive government, doesn't mean that there is a deal or there is any hope of the old so-called political elite or warlords coming back into any political process. That I feel has, because there is no they have no leverage, and also as far as when we are talking about that, the resistance which we saw the resistance which sort of tried to hold out was the NRF, which is the National Resistance Force, which is primarily Ahmad Shah Massoud's son, Ahmad Massoud, trying to uh, gather people up in the Panjshir Valley, which is north of Kabul. But that has, is I don't think it will achieve any real purpose. Or right now, of course, we see on social media there are some Afghan Freedom Front, etc., trying to garner support in the West. But as we see, the statement a few months ago by the U.S. Charge d'Affaires for Afghanistan, she categorically says that America has no appetite for any resistance. So the U.S. has basically accepted the Taliban. The Iran has also accepted them. And when we're talking about Iran, it's very interesting that recently we saw what happened with the attack in Cameroon, and then the consequent actions taken by Iran which was one of the largest attacks in a long time, at the anniversary of General Soleimani, at his fourth anniversary, uh, is that we saw the action, which I think is coordinated. Although there's posturing between Afghanistan and Pakistan, sorry, between Pakistan and Iran. Uh, because I see there will doubts that it will not reach to any escalation. But interestingly, one of the characters has been implicated in those attacks belongs to was released from a prison in Afghanistan. When the Taliban took over, they released all the prisoners, a few thousand prisoners from prisons in Kabul. So he had already been implicated in an attack in. He had allegiance to the ISKP, and he had was involved in an attack on the Kabul University, and he was supposed to be hung to death by a Supreme Court ruling in 2017. And he has their last reports are there looking for him in Western Tehran. So, but there has been no. If you look at it, it's interesting that there has been this acrimony and this shooting of missiles at each other in Balochistan area between Pakistan and Iran. but no such action has been conducted. So that tells you that especially the security and intelligence setup between Afghanistan and Iran are coordinating very closely. And also another thing I would like to cover here is that post the October 7th action by uh, Hamas in Gaza, there was a report in November that the there were some Israeli agents which were arrested in Afghanistan trying to plan an attack on Iran. This was around 5th of November, around a month after October 7th. So that is to be watched as far as Afghanistan is concerned, because Afghanistan has about 20 odd terrorist groups. Okay. And when we talk, their ideology, the common ideology which binds them is to enforce Sharia, and they are basically targeting right from the Uyghur, China's Uyghur area, and Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, not Turkmenistan, and Turkmenistan partly. But then you have the TTP, which is very majorly, as we all know, is TTP, which was formed in 2007, uh, uh, which basically the objective is to have Sharia all over Pakistan and to free the which is now combined to KPK, but erstwhile FATA and what we know as Northwestern Frontier Province, which was by an amendment in Pakistan renamed as KPK in 2000. I think, if I'm not wrong, around 2010. In 2018, FATA and KPK was basically FATA was combined with KPK, and there was also, because this area has 25% Shia population, interestingly, Hazaras basically. So they took a little bit of a offense to this, because not a little but a lot, because using a Pakhtun name did not sort of give a true representation to their identity. Besides this, as far as terrorists are concerned, ISKP is, I think, as far as India's security concerns, is, besides the usual suspects which are still operating in Afghanistan, is Jaish-e-Mohammed and LET, is the ISKP. As we know, in if I'm not wrong, in 22 there were attacks in Coimbatore and I think Mangalore, which were not successful, and then they were actually the ISKP took credit for those attacks after a few months in 23, early 23. So, and they are trying to recruit people from the organizations which have been banned in India, like the People's Front, etc. So that India needs to watch very carefully, and especially in the south of India. As far as China is concerned, China basically is making a lot of noise, I say, but I doubt that the US will allow it to have a free ride in Afghanistan. And because they're already facing problems, and ISKP, as we know, is targeting them also. They're already facing problems with CPEC. So they will make a lot of expected noise and show their presence. I recently heard from reliable sources that the Chinese ambassador in Kabul is trying to uh, 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 compared to India, China has a major presence and has a senior diplomat there. India has a low diplomatic, a junior diplomatic arrangement. So India, I don't know, needs to take a call on that. But they are also telling the Taliban that they would, not only build infrastructure but develop and invest in, which is the huge mining potential, especially lithium in Afghanistan, which we heard stories. And at that time, when the US was there, the estimated wealth of minerals was about anywhere $3 to $4 trillion. But lithium has been discovered there and is a source. As we know, there is a big fight over rare earths today all over the world with the whole a focus on electric vehicles and equipment. So that is a very critical source or a resource. Besides that, China is there are different reports trying to build a road in the northeast where it has a small border with Afghanistan near the Wakhan corridor. So the different reports. Some say that they have done the basic survey. Some say that they have started construction. So that is very important for China. But like I said, China, it is yet to be seen how China will secure its investments in Afghanistan. Another factor which is different from this time is different this time is earlier the Chinese labor was allowed to come to Afghanistan. The Afghans, although have the Taliban, although have allowed Chinese investments and operations, but they do not allow Chinese labor to operate in Afghanistan. So except for the skilled labor or higher workers. I think I don't know. You want me to go on or?
No, okay. I'll lead you on to a few questions so that
Yeah. Yeah.
let me. Okay, let me ask you the first question. I think you covered a large footprint of Afghanistan to give a true picture. Wow, kya ho raha hai. Important thing which you said. Let me to recapitulate is
Mm.
it's peaceful. Everyone thought Afghanistan will descend into chaos, but you said it's peaceful. That's a great good thing, right? The drug and donation economy has turned into some extent, though Afghanistan is still aid dependent and it is food insecure. Probably that is the next stage.
Right.
The Taliban have been able to get more peace and security into the area, which is again very surprising. And an important point which you have made is that the US is still firmly in the saddle. Without US support, probably the Taliban won't survive. That is something which many of us are still missing the point, right? And US is the one which is probably supporting the finance of the whole system. What you said is important that the Afghani is stronger than the Pakistani currency. As you are speaking, I did a check. One US dollar gets you 71 point or 72 Afghanis, and one US dollar gets you 279 Pakistani rupees, a little short of 300. In a sense, the differential is one Afghani gets you 3.5 Pakistani rupees, which is huge.
Yeah.
So Pakistani has gone down, Pakistan has gone down, and Afghanistan has gone up in the overall sense. And if you see today, Pakistan is not as peaceful as Afghanistan.
Right.
Right. Now, the the question which I want you to answer, and I'll ask you a few questions and lead you on to it, and I'll pick your thing. Has Afghanistan changed for the better for its people?
So
It's a very
it
pointed
depends on
question.
who you are addressing. See, uh, of course, people like freedom. People like to be progressive. People do not like social. Sort of to operate in a social hard rule. Another thing which I'll cover on this is besides the clamping down on the rights and women, most of the media organizations, there are strict rules for media to, because when I went to Kabul in 2002, there was hardly any media, print or otherwise. Uh, the US made a major effort in establishing, one of them is Tulu, which is still operating by
Yeah,
US
Tolo is
funding.
still operating.
Saad Husseini is a friend who started up Tulu. Was called the Rupert Murdoch of Afghanistan. In fact,
Okay.
Rupert Murdoch made an investment there. He came from Australia. He was not a media person. He was basically an investment banker like I am by training. So it basically they have clamped down on strict code on. I saw the same thing in Tehran. I was in Tehran a few years ago, and there was a small group of people playing music, and there, whatever CID or police came. This is inside Tehran in a park, and they quickly, caught them and took them away. So there are rules which are enforced, but like I said, uh, it is a process of growing. I don't think the Taliban, with the way the world is today, um, and with a large younger population who's connected, they have not shut down on media, and you can still make a WhatsApp call to Kabul and whatever. It may be monitored, but that aside, uh, is that they will not be able to enforce this for a long time. They will have to gradually release on the social issues, gradually moderate them. So that is one. I'm talking about people who remain. So when your question fundamentally is addressing two populations: people remaining in Afghanistan versus people who fled Afghanistan. Okay, people remaining in Afghanistan are, most of them, uh, did not have the option to leave. Okay, some of them did not want to leave, because if you look at the whole, I will talk of Afghanistan in the recent past, means post 9/11. See, the most of the American aid, etc., went into big cities, and went. It did not reach the grassroots levels, to a large extent, and even infrastructure was built mainly concentrated in certain areas. It was not that far and wide. So, a life of a farmer in Afghanistan actually is better now in that context,
Okay.
because the state
So
was not providing him any services, and that's the gap which Taliban went in. So there was a statistic done by Taliban of their popularity. This is very interesting, during Karzai's time, and their sort of support for Taliban was much high. But in Ghani's government, it sort of lowered because the violence naturally was going up. So they were suffering. But now, as peace has returned, so, and I'm not saying, again, I'm not taking any sides, but objectively,
yeah, I can understand.
yeah. So
So
most of,
it's a mixed bag, but definitely it has not gone worse. That's what you would put it
yeah.
across.
So
It's
so
not
I'll
overall.
so the pluses are that you have peace. The minus is you have economic hardship. The
Yeah.
second minus
Okay.
is that you have economic hardship, plus you have restrictions, especially for women and girls,
Okay.
on
See,
social issues.
I get the point, but it is not so bad as with everyone was led to believe that
No.
it will go bad
So
and all
you
that. So
mentioned about the civil war. I'll just add one line there.
yeah.
See, actually, the Taliban emerged because of civil war. If you go in the history of
Yeah.
Afghanistan, when the Russians left '92, because Gul Hikmatyar and Rabbani and the likes of them could not get up a cohesive government in place. So that gave scope for a Taliban to emerge. And when I set up shop in Kabul, so I asked I had very young employees. So I asked them who lived through all the phases of Afghanistan, and I asked them to compare. So the one thing they used to always say, whatever the Taliban were, it was a peaceful period for us. We were not in a state of war. So
Okay.
that
That's a very important way of thinking. Yeah, I go with it. The second question I have for you is, you see, when the Americans were withdrawing away from Afghanistan, there was a lot of talk that China will step in a big way. China will fund. It's a vacuum. Pakistan and China will virtually, run Afghanistan, and China will invest heavily and take away all the minerals, and you'll see a changed security architecture in this region. I was skeptical about it even then, and I remain skeptical about it even now, like you rightly said. The fundamental reason is that if for 20 years USA was staying in Afghanistan and it knew that lithium was there, it knew copper was there, it knew all the minerals were there, it didn't take out 1 kg out of all this. It neither did it start any operation there. So, do you think in this kind of a story, China can do anything great? Though you have touched upon it, do you think they
No,
can
so I think
make
China
anything?
will posture, like I say, and be there and try
Posture.
to. Yeah, no, but they're on the ground. So let's understand. They're at different levels. It's like, I'll compare it. Like I go to Nepal, they're there. They're competing. It's in a way, there are three people competing in
Okay.
Nepal: India, US, and China, right? But Chinese diplomatic engagement is on much higher level. So you cannot just
Okay.
set them
Wish it
aside. But
away.
you're right, in terms of implementing projects, how successful they'll be or how fast that will grow, is I'm very skeptical about that for various reasons.
Okay. Then China has one this fear that, Islamic terrorism or Islamism or Islamic fundamentalism will spread into Xinjiang. Is
Right.
there any sense you
That is
have
the
of
major
this?
reason. Major reason they are there, because I read reports that they asked the Taliban to basically move. So on the terrorism issue, another thing. So I was speaking to some insiders and interlocutors of Taliban on what is the position on different terrorist groups, and their simple thing is that these people have basically fought alongside us. So we will not support them going out, but we will not, uh, you know, openly go to, sort of act against them.
Okay,
So
that's a
they
fair one.
basically, yeah.
That's a fair one,
So
right?
China
And
basically is it's the elements which are, sort of anti the Uyghur elements. They basically have closer eyes on them, and to whatever extent contain the action. But I don't think they can completely eradicate them from Afghanistan.
okay, now how do you see this relationship between Afghanistan, TTP, and Pakistan go as you look at it ahead?
So TTP is not going to stop. I don't see that. Afghanistan now. Another point I didn't pick up. So with this Afghan refugee situation, okay,
Yeah,
uh, the Afghans, as we know, there a few 100,000 Afghans have been pushed back, and I read reports that the Pakis have confiscated. The one number was $4 billion worth of assets of Afghans who
yeah,
they have pushed out. Plus, the trade has stopped. Durkham is, as I know, stopped right now as we speak. Only
yeah.
one
It's
border or
closed.
borders are, which is a huge, because see, Afghanistan is a landlocked country, and that's the opportunity for India to seriously act on Chava. That's another area which I think covered on India's perspective. One is the security. On our trade with Afghanistan and rest of Central Asia, we have to seriously, I have been to Chava thrice. We, because of the sanctions and other complications, we make a lot of noises, but we have not cohesively implemented, things. So we need to act there, implement what we are saying there at a faster pace.
So that means at this point of time, we need greater cooperation with Iran because I don't think we can get through Chabahar and through the
No, we already
other
have that.
route.
Iran rather
No,
is
no, we
telling us,
have. We need to step up the pace and step
yes,
up on the accelerator to do what we are supposed to do.
right, right.
Right? That's what I'm trying to put across. We need to get better with Iran and pump in or trade to Afghanistan and of course on to Central Asia through the Chabahar road. That is a given, and it's been lagging for the past 10 years. On that also, there's no doubt. But I think it's an important thing. Overall, you think that it's time for India to take a forward step with Afghanistan and expand its relations?
Yeah, of course, especially economic relations.
Yeah,
I've been saying that in all
and
my podcasts.
okay, yeah, I think so too. I mean, we have to,
There's a,
it doesn't matter what the
there's a,
color of the cat is as far as
please
it
notice
catches mice. Yeah,
the
go ahead.
battery of my laptop is very low. So if you don't mind, give me a second. You can go ahead. I'll
Yeah,
switch to my
yeah, go
phone.
ahead, go 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 ahead. No problem. Not an issue.
Yeah. So
Not an issue at all. So the point which Samir was making is that Afghanistan has changed. Afghanistan and Taliban today are not the Afghanistan and Taliban which were there, say, 2 years back when the Americans left. A lot has changed. Certain things are still going on. There'll be the remnants, and certain things have changed drastically. And our ideas have also changed accordingly. And that is why Jalaluddin, yeah,
yeah, you can take this on because I don't want this
yeah,
to.
no, 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 fine. Yeah, that's first class.
No,
Right.
I'll
That's
just.
why, no problems. Don't worry.
No,
That's
no,
why
I'll just.
Haqqani's son has been called as a chief guest to the
1 minute.
1 minute. You'll have to put your,
Yeah. 1 minute.
yeah,
I'll
now
just.
you're okay?
Yeah, now I'm okay.
Okay, first class. We'll continue with this only.
Yeah. Yeah.
So India is also changing its tracks, and that's something important to know. Now I'll take a few questions from the audience, Samir. Because a lot of
Yeah.
questions, and I think very important questions people have thrown up. You will find it